Of the 4 samples that were brought in, any of these 4 good?
Well, to start, they were all either an SA, an SB, at best one was an SC, all being obsolete oils. To start, those are oils you would not use in virtually any car currently on the road today. So to say any of them are good would certainly be misleading in that they're all obsolete engine oils. Beyond that, even considering they're obsolete, the quality, the contaminants in those oils, their lack of meeting the viscosity grade requirements is certainly an issue. So even as obsolete oils, they still don't meet the specifications of those obsolete oils. And beyond that, some of those products had significant amount of contaminants. In one case, in the case of MaxiGuard, the product itself looks like it may have been contaminated with used oil.
None of them meet the viscosity test? None of them are acceptable?
None of them meet the viscosity, they're labeled viscosity. Keep in mind, however, that the viscosities, the labels on some of these omit the W. They say 10 dash, not 10W. In one case, in the case of a U.S. economy, they say X-Y on the front of the label, and the back it says this is a 5230. In other words, saying it's not a 5W30, it's a 5230, whatever that means.
Which doesn't really have any meaning.
It has no meaning, and it unfortunately it has meaning to a consumer and is misleading to the consumer, because when they see 5-30, I think a consumer who has some idea about motor oil would assume that was a 5W30, not knowing there was a technical infraction, and it's really not a 5W30.
Let's go with the MaxiGuard first. What were the problems that you found with MaxiGuard?
Well, the MaxiGuard was, when I mentioned that one of them had what appeared to be used oil in it, MaxiGuard was that sample. As an example, we have silicon at 435 parts per million. Technical jargon, but the fact is that's a lot of what is typically referred to as abrasive material or sand, fine particles of sand. In a typical engine oil today, you might see 8-9 parts per million. They have 435. Very significant amount, and that would be typically very abrasive to an engine, harmful to an engine.
So it might be as bad or worse than the oil that was already in there?
It'd be unusual to find 435 parts per million of silicon in oil that you took out of a car after 10,000 miles, something in that range. It'd be very unusual. It would indicate you were probably running with an issue with your air cleaner. You didn't have it on. That's a lot of dirt. In addition, that particular sample had aluminum at 50 parts per million. Aluminum is not something you find in new oil. This is typically associated with a piston, the wear on a piston, aluminum piston. Also iron at 13 parts per million, another component in engine wearing. So that would be suggestive of some component of used oil or some other contaminant, but most likely some used oil. And reflecting back on what we saw when we looked at that sample being darker, it's certainly suggestive of used oil contamination.
So it looks like they are repackaging used oil or mixing used oil with new oil.
It could be. I mean, it's certainly suggestive of that. And keep in mind, this is a product that is marked as being an SA. So again, pointing out that an SA oil is obsolete, it's worse than an obsolete oil in terms of having these other contaminants. Not only doesn't have the additives, what it does have in it can be very harmful to an engine.
What type of harm could this do?
Well, the most obvious would be the abrasive, assuming that silicon, which most likely is sand or silicate. It would be abrasive to the engine and would accelerate wear. And at 435 parts per million, you're talking about a lot of wear, engine wear.
So it would almost. It sounds like it would almost be doing the opposite of what oil is supposed to be doing.
Oh, clearly. It's not providing the protection because it has no additives, and now that it's in the engine doing some level of lubricating, what it's doing is it's taking abrasive material, circulating the engine, and accelerating wear.
Of the 4, is that the worst one, would you say, or is it hard to say?
No, I would say this is probably the worst of the batch. And I'll go back to the point, though, when we're talking about all oils, all 4 that were obsolete, none of them are good. I wouldn't put them in my car, and I wouldn't recommend anyone put them in their car because they're obsolete engine oils. They don't have any additives to protect an engine. So it's the worst of the worst, the worst of the bad, I would say.
All right. How about Black Knight? This was a new one that you hadn't seen before, but it seems to be all over the place now.
Yeah, we do see a lot of Black Knight appearing in the New Jersey market, and that oil is listed as an SB, which is a hair better than an SA, but it's still obsolete. So regardless of what we found in the lab, let's start with it's an obsolete motor oil. But in looking at the test results, one of the things that's clear in this too is that it has silicon in it at 34 parts per million. Compare that to the 435 with the previous MaxiGuard, and you can see we're significantly lower. But in a used oil sample taken out of a car that has 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 miles, you'd probably see 34 parts per million of silicon. So that's contamination that you don't want in your engine, and you're putting it in as new oil.
How does that type of contamination get in?
Well, there are a number of ways. It could be in the case of MaxiGuard, it appears to be associated with maybe commingling with some used oil. It could be very, very poor processing where you have open containers of oil, you have open blending batches or tanks, and you're getting external contaminants into it. It could be in lines, number of sources.
But in any event, it's not good.
You don't want it in your engine. And interestingly, in this case, they say it's an SB oil. This product actually has some additives in it that suggest it's not an SB. And specific to Black Knight, it doesn't meet its viscosity requirements of being a 10W30. They too, though, say 10-30 on their label, which is in my regards is hiding behind what people have learned to be a familiar nomenclature, 10W30. They're saying 10-30. And would likely say, we never claimed this was a 10W30. And in fact, it's not. So it's obsolete. It doesn't meet the viscosity requirements of a 1030. It has silica in it, and it has a little bit of additive. Not typical of an SB, which at the end of the day could actually be a slight plus on a bad oil.
Right. If it's whether it is or it isn't a 10W, I mean, it's obviously not a 10W30, whether they label it as such. The bottom line is Black Knight suitable for today's cars?
Absolutely not. Without even testing it, the answer is no. It's an SB, API SB, and an API SB, you're looking at an oil that was made for cars built prior to 1951. So if you have a car built prior to 1951, you could use that. But considering that today's oils, API SN, are backward compatible, your best bet is to use today's engine oil, not something from not 1951 technology. Absolutely not.
You know, we've gone by gas stations, you know, name brand gas stations, and right by the pump, you see nothing but Black Knight. That would appear to indicate that that's what they're going to use if you need a quart of oil.
And I suspect that's why we're seeing more of it in New Jersey. That's why you're seeing it at the gas pumps, because they're offering it, consumers are buying it, and the gas station or the convenience store that's selling it is making a good margin on that product, because it's a product that doesn't cost nearly as much to make as a current spec product. And another important point about this Black Knight is that it says recommended for pre-1988 gasoline engines. Well, that technically is correct. Pre-1988 gasoline engines that recommend, it says that recommend this oil. The SB goes back to pre-1951. So I guess technically by saying it's pre-1988, that's correct. But you'd have to go all the way back to 1951 when that spec was in effect. So that too is misleading. People with older cars, 86, 85, feeling that, okay, this is good for my car. Not so. And that's putting aside the technical aspects of it not meeting its viscosity requirements and the abrasives.
And when it doesn't meet viscosity, that also means it's not lubricating or protecting the engine.
It's not as it's supposed to. In this case, the viscosity was significantly lower than it should be for that grade. So it's thinner. You're going to have metal parts that come closer together. You put the abrasives in there where you have metal moving parts that are closer together with abrasives, and you're going to accelerate wear, generate heat, and cause more problems for that engine.
Okay. We can go on, I guess, to the US's. U.S. economy, this is the one that they claim is just for top-off oil. And it's also one of those ones that's either 5-30 or 10-30. What did you find with U.S. economy?
Well, you're exactly right. It's a 5-30, and the viscosity of this product is not a 5W30. Not surprising, and I think when we spoke earlier, I said if you don't see the W, we've learned that should tip off that there's something not right about that product. In fact, in every instance here, it's proving to be the case. This product is not a 5W30. It's a heavier product. Its viscosity index at 74 would not be anywhere near where you'd expect it to be for even a multi-viscosity oil. So without spending a lot more time and energy and money on finding what that true viscosity is, it could even be a straight grade. So you're not getting what you expect. This product, oddly enough, is listed as a SA. I'm sorry, this product is not listed as any API performance claim, none at all. It doesn't say SB, SA, nothing. In fact, it has a pretty good dose of additive in it. Something very unusual in terms of the additives, not the kind of additive package we'd expect to see, but it has some smattering of additives in it at a significant level. Likewise, 95 parts per million of silicon. Remember back, 435 in one case, 34 in the other. We're at 95. Same story applies. You've got abrasives in here. It's going to accelerate wear.
The normal silicon level as well?
In a new engine oil, and we've tested a lot of new engine oils, typically you're going to be at about 7, 8, 9 parts per million silicon.
So this is more than 10 times higher than it should be?
Yes, yeah. And the silicon you would normally find in new oil, those low levels are associated with antifoamant. Good stuff put in the oil. This is not antifoamant. You don't treat an engine oil deliberately with that much antifoamant, or you will get foaming. This is a contaminant.
So again, I mean, although they're claiming it's for use in top off, I mean, this is, I have to assume, this is not a motor oil that you would think that you would want to use.
I wouldn't put it in my car. I wouldn't recommend anyone putting it in their car, top off or not. I would assume if you had no other choice, absolutely no other choice, and your car was out of oil, and you had to get somewhere, use it and abuse your car because it's an emergency situation. Short of that, I don't see any reason why this is would be used. And the term top off is certainly not an industry term. If you top off enough, that's the only oil in your engine.
U.S. Spirit, meantime, this is the one where right on the back it says it's obsolete and it shouldn't be used for any car after like the 30s or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So presumably it would be the worst of the four, and then the main question would be why the hell are you selling it? But you found something interesting here. You found it's the worst of the four.
The U.S. Spirit is a bit of a head scratcher. It's listed as an API SA. API SA means there are no additives. It's simply a base oil with no additives at all. This product is chock full of additives. It has zinc at levels that would be typical of today's engine oils. It has phosphorus at levels that are close to, well, at 1,200 parts per million. If you're over 800 in today's oils, you're out of spec. 800 being the cutoff max, they're at 1,242. That's a lot of additive. They have calcium at 541 parts per million. This is not heavily additized, but this is certainly heavily additized in some areas. Farthest thing from an SA. SA would have no additives in it at all. So this is a real head scratcher in that it's not an SA, it's not an SN. I don't know what it is. But it's additized. In addition, its viscosity actually comes close to meeting specification for a 10W, and they call it a 10W40. It comes close. It's not, but it comes close.
I mean, it's a little bit odd, isn't it, to have a warning on the back that says this contains no additives and is therefore not suitable for your car, when in fact it has all kinds of additives. Just
Well, the first part of the question is it's not unusual to put that on the back of a label. In fact, we endorse it and recommend it. If it's an SA oil, you should be saying there are no additives. It's not recommended for cars built prior to 1933. That should be done because there are some applications for SA, albeit very few. Could be compressors. There could be other applications, very few, and they should know that there are no additives in that. In this case, if you're looking to buy a true SA for use in applications that require no additives, you're going to have a surprise because you have additives in here, and that could be detrimental in those situations where you don't want any additives.
So this oil would not be good in a car, nor would it be good in a situation where you might actually want no additive oil.
That's correct. Keeping in mind, too, that this is listed as an SA, so by definition, it is no good for a car. Right. It's obsolete.
Can you think of any reason you would want to use this product? Anything?
I'd go back to the desperation. If I had to get somewhere and I didn't care about the damage it might do to my car, last choice and the only choice. But aside from that, no.
But otherwise, lawnmower, snowblower, compressor, car, it sounds like there's not a product in the world that this is designed for.
I can't think of one.
Yeah. All right, so, again, we've looked at all four. Are you surprised that not one of them sort of passed your test?
No, I'm not surprised. We've looked at some of these in the past, and a couple of these we've issued consumer alerts on in the past. So we're not surprised in a couple. We've not seen the Black Knight product. I'm a bit surprised to see that added to the list, particularly having been living in New Jersey and seeing the New Jersey market and the appearance of Black Knight. It seems like the deck is stacked pretty much against the consumer if they're shopping for oil to change the oil themselves or to, quote, top off the oil with a quart or two. It seems the deck is pretty stacked. So that shocks me, that the probability of getting some of this bad stuff is fairly high in New Jersey.
And I think I mentioned to you that I went to the one gas station where the two types of oil they sold in the little store were U.S. Spirit and U.S. Economy, and it sounds like from your test results, you don't want either one of them.
No, and a smart shopper or smart buyer, in the case of that convenience store, should stop as soon as they see API SA. And if they take the time to listen a little bit to what's going on in the industry, if they don't see 5W or 10W next to it, stop. But that's not what they're doing. There's good margin in this, and the consumer's paying the price.
And that's probably the biggest problem, and the fact that these are for sale in New Jersey, as you said, that indicates New Jerseyans are at risk of this.
Yeah, and what's troubling about them being available in New Jersey is that some states, Michigan most recently, put a stop sale on some of the products that we've looked at. Bullseye motor oil is an example. City Petroleum. Very prevalent in the Midwest. In fact, we find Bullseye in New Jersey, we find it in New York. But New Jersey is yet to take any action to remove these products from the shelves, although the state of Michigan, the state of North Carolina, has plenty of data, enough data to have their Attorney General, their Department of Agriculture, order it removed from the shelves. Cannot sell it in those states. Yet, in the state I live in, it's still, some of these products are still readily available.
That's got to trouble me.
In fact, it's sometimes quite embarrassing when we get calls from people that's saying Petroleum Quality Institute of America is in New Jersey. Why isn't New Jersey doing something about it? Well, we're working on it. In part, we appreciate what you're doing to bring attention to it. Well, I think the first thing they do is they need to be educated, and that's where you come in to get help get the word out to consumers in New Jersey. Very important. Little things like look for that SA, API, SA, SB. We're at API, SN. If you don't see an API, SN, an SM on that product, you're looking at something that's quite a bit older. So just be familiar with that at a minimum. Also, look at that viscosity. If you don't see the W next to that beginning number, 5W, 10W, alarm should go off. Something's not right. Secondly, there are some bad oils. You brought attention to them, 4 of them. Unfortunately, we found in some states, the only way the states really react to this is when they hear from consumers. And in some states, unfortunately, we hear attorney generals say, we're not getting complaints. The reality is, oftentimes the consumer doesn't know what caused that engine to end up in a shop, that car to end up in a shop. Oftentimes they don't know why they only got 80,000 miles on that car when they should have gotten 180,000 miles. So they need, I think in this case, what can consumers do? Let the Attorney General, let Consumers Affairs know that these oils are in our market and people are at risk.
Are you convinced that that is used oil?
No, I'm not convinced it's used oil. The data doesn't say without a doubt it's used oil, but it's certainly very indicative of having some used oil in it, possibly a new oil commingled with a used oil. But you would need to do a lot more testing to see if there were other components in there to definitively say if it was used oil. I can say that the metals that are in there, aluminum at that level, the iron at the level it's at, as well as the silicon, would be reflective of what you'd see in a used oil sample. Not necessarily from a car. In a car I'd expect to see more chromium from the rings, but it's reflective of what you'd see from oil that had been through machinery. There are other sources for aluminum and iron and silicon, but most commonly when you're talking about lubricants, it's a used lubricant that has been blended or commingled with a new lubricant. In either case, it's not good.
I mean, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
For all four of us.
And in fact, the bottom line is that at the end of the day, even without the testing, you don't want to put these oils in your car. They're obsolete. The American Petroleum Institute makes it very clear in their publications it can cause damage to a modern vehicle. Define modern, in the case of these products, best you can go is to the 1950s. In 3 of the cases, you have to go back to 1933.
Right. Worst of the worst?
The worst of the worst in this group, I would say, is likely the MaxiGuard, in that it has that high level of aluminum, very high silicon. It doesn't meet its viscometric requirements, and it has other contaminants.
Best of this lot. Not that that's saying much.
I'm hesitant to say the best of the bad, because it might suggest that someone should be using it. And I'll keep going back to the best of the obsolete oils that I wouldn't recommend anyone to use. The one that comes closest to meeting a specification from 1933 would probably be the U.S. Spirit. If I was desperate and had to use one of these, I'd probably say U.S. Spirit, because although it's not an SA, it appears to have some additive in it that could be helpful. The viscosity is reasonably close. So if I'm ignoring the fact that I'm not looking for an SA, that's probably the best of the worst.
Well, obviously, the best of the worst, as you said. I mean, that's not really like a consolation prize. I mean, and you don't want to imply that maybe it's okay.
No. I think the label itself, saying it's an API service SA, says it's not okay. Right. We've been to hundreds in New Jersey, hundreds in many other states. When we were in Texas, we covered over 1,200 miles. Over 1,200 miles. We found a propensity of SA oils, a large amount of SA oils. So it's unfortunately very true that you do find these readily available at gas stations.
Right, and if you pull into a gas station and you say, let's say you pull into a gas station, the attendant checks your oil, although that probably rarely happens. But even if you were to go to an oil, you were to pull into a gas station, you ask, hey, could you check my oil? They say you're low, and you say, okay, put in a quart. You may not even necessarily specify the brand, right?
Most consumers would not. Most consumers would not. And the fact is, when you pull into a gas station, there's something unsaid in that. And that's when people pull into a gas station, there's typically a brand associated with that gas. They may be reading a major brand, and oftentimes they are reading a major brand on that canopy. And there is some level of trust, an umbrella level of trust that comes with that major brand. And when you see that oil there, you don't ask. In fact, my guess is a lot of consumers, although we don't have the research to back this, but a lot of consumers probably believe that oil is the same as the name on that canopy, right, and never ask.
So when you see, one gas station and all they're selling is U.S. Spirit, U.S. Economy, is that right?
I would say if it's these U.S. spirits and these U.S. economies that are API SA, absolutely not. It's absolutely wrong.
It doesn't really give motorists much of a choice.
No.
They have to choose between two, and none of them are acceptable oil.
No, and the disappointing part, too, is they're probably going to pay, because we bought a lot of this oil, they're probably going to pay $55 a quart for that oil, which is, again, it's misleading that they're buying something of quality. What they're buying is an obsolete oil that's making that service station owner, that convenience store owner, a lot of margin, a lot of money.
And again, when you go to a name brand station, like we found one where it's just nothing but Black Knight, rows and rows of it at the pump. Is there an implication there when you have that right at the pump that oil must be of better quality?
I would say the implication's clear that it is a quality oil, and that's associated with the brand of that gas station. In most cases, that brand is a well-known brand. The assumption is that the oil is good quality, and that major brand, that marquee brand on the canopy, is policing that, and they're not. They actually don't have the right to tell them what they can sell when it comes to that convenience store or outside at that in terms of oil.
Right.
So it's very misleading to the consumer, very troubling to us.